Welcome back to the deep dive. We are really glad to have you with us today.
Yeah, it is great to be here.
So today we are opening up a dossier that is, well, it is a bit uncomfortable, I think. And I mean that in the best possible way.
It definitely pushes some boundaries.
It forces you to look at an industry we think we all understand perfectly, which is finance. And it makes you realize we might be looking at it through completely the wrong lens entirely.
It is a massive perspective shift
Hmm.
because usually when we analyze finance, we're looking at market caps or liquidity ratios or algorithmic trading.
Right, the numbers.
Exactly. It's a world of cold, hard math.
Right. So if I ask you what a bank is, you'd probably say it's a vault or a ledger or just a utility.
Sure.
But this dossier argues that while money might be mathematical, markets are actually emotional. They run on fear and trust and belief and anticipation.
Which is very true.
And the central thesis here is that the financial industry has a massive invisible problem. And it is not about regulation. It's not about interest rates. It is about atmosphere.
Atmosphere sounds so soft, doesn't it?
It really does.
But the report frames it as a structural failure. The premise is that finance has basically forgotten. It's fundamentally a human system. We aren't just trading numbers, we're trading trust.
Yeah.
And trust is a feeling. It is not a spreadsheet cell.
So that is our mission today. We are going to deconstruct this finance dossier. We need to understand how financial institutions are trying to evolve from being just transactional engines, which is what they are now,
Right.
into something the report calls cultural infrastructure. And I have to be honest, when I first read the headline claiming a bank's interior design acts as an operating system for risk management, I mean, my skepticism radar went off completely.
I don't blame you. It sounds like interior decorating trying to sound like computer science.
Yes, exactly. It sounded like buzzword soup.
It does at first.
Yeah.
But if you strip away the jargon, the logic is actually quite sharp. It's really about psychology. If you walk into a room that feels chaotic or sterile or just cheap funny, your brain processes financial risk differently than if you walk into a space that feels authored and stable and permanent.
Okay, so let's unpack this operating system concept because the report opens with a very bold claim. It says finance is not just an economic system, it is a cultural operating system. What does that actually mean for the listener?
It means finance shapes reality. Think about it as a symbolic actor. When you deposit money or sign a wealth management contract, you aren't just buying a service.
You're buying safety.
You are buying into a symbol of stability. You are buying the idea that this institution is going to be here in 50 years.
So a bank isn't just a place to store value, it is essentially a symbol of value itself.
Precisely. And the report makes a crucial point here. Markets respond to identity just as much as they respond to numbers. If an institution feels unstable,
If its identity is weak?
exactly if its identity is confused, the market punishes it. We have seen this in recent banking crises. When the narrative breaks, the bank breaks.
And this is where the term EURAN comes into play. EURAN. The report centers on this concept of the EURAN intervention. It's basically a framework to reframe the entire industry from being a utility provider to being authored cultural infrastructure.
Right. It is moving away from the idea that a bank is like a power company where the only goal is just keeping the lights on.
Right, just processing payments.
Yeah, and moving toward the idea that a bank is actually an author of culture. It dictates how we perceive value.
But according to this dossier, the current system is failing miserably at that. And this section of the report really stood out to me because it reads like a medical chart. It is a strict diagnosis of a sick patient.
It is a diagnostic, yes. It lists structural problems. And they aren't critiquing the bankers themselves. They're observing the structural failures of the environments the bankers work in.
Let's run through these symptoms, because I think anyone listening who has stepped into a bank branch or a corporate office recently will recognize them immediately. The first one is that institutions are treated as transactional engines.
This is the baseline problem. Institutions are treated as machines. You put an input in, you get an output out. They lack soul.
They are just functional.
Functional but not relational. And because they are just machines, they suffer from the second symptom, which is an absence of symbolic identity.
Which is a fancy way of saying they don't have a face.
Or any deeper meaning. They don't stand for anything other than the transaction. And that manifests physically in the third symptom, what the report calls experiential neutrality.
The beige wall problem. I loved that description.
It's painfully accurate, though. Think about the last time you went to a bank or an investment firm. Glass partitions, neutral carpets, maybe some generic abstract art that means nothing, acoustic tiles.
It's all designed to look professional and risk-averse.
But by trying to look like everyone else.
They end up looking like nobody.
Exactly. It creates an environment that is emotionally flat. And that leads directly to the next symptom, homogenization. The report points out that a bank in Zurich looks exactly like a bank in New York, which looks like a bank in Singapore.
Right.
If you woke up in a conference room with a concussion, you wouldn't know which continent you were on.
And why is that dangerous, though? I mean, isn't brand consistency good? Fast food chains are the same everywhere, and they do perfectly fine.
For a cheap burger, consistency is fine. For handling your life's legacy, it's actually fatal. It erodes identity. If you look like everyone else, you are interchangeable. And if you are interchangeable, you have no pricing power and no loyalty.
That makes sense.
Plus, there is the fifth symptom, the lack of emotional architecture. Managing money is incredibly stressful. It involves anxiety and fear of the future and legacy planning.
Yet the spaces are designed entirely for efficiency.
Right, not for managing that heavy emotional load. Which connects to the next issue, weak narrative coherence.
Well,
the client journey is fragmented.
Oh, I found this part really relatable. The report describes it like you walk into a luxury lobby that looks great with marble floors and high ceilings.
And then you take a generic elevator to a sterile corridor with flickering lights, sit in a beige room, and then maybe look at a confusing digital app on your phone.
The story just breaks.
The narrative isn't consistent at all, and the result of all this broken storytelling and beige paint is the seventh symptom, an erosion of institutional trust.
Which culminates in the final symptom, the inability to differentiate in a saturated market, or a differentiation crisis.
Right. If every bank looks the same and feels the same, the client simply cannot tell them apart. They just go with the cheapest option. The premium value just evaporates.
So we have the diagnosis. The patient, being the financial sector, is suffering from being boring, fragmented, and emotionally flat. It has no soul. So how do we fix it?
This is where the EURAN intervention comes in.
Right. And the dossier emphasizes that this isn't a renovation. We aren't just telling banks to buy nicer furniture. It is a new OS, a new operating system.
Correct. The core solution, the first system, is culture as the operating system. It posits that culture is the foundational layer that everything else, like compliance trading sales, actually sits on top of.
And EURAN breaks this down into very specific, almost engineering-like systems.
Yes, they are very structured.
Let's run through these systems because the names alone are fascinating. They sound more like sci-fi technologies than design concepts. First up is the art-driven spatial method.
This is one of the most misunderstood concepts. Usually art in a bank is just decoration. It is a painting hung on a wall to cover a blank spot. The art-driven spatial method flips that entirely. It uses chromatic feels and geometric rhythms to actually define the space.
So the art isn't in the room, the art is the room.
In a way, yes. It's about using visual rhythm and color frequency to actively affect mood.
Like altering blood pressure or something.
Exactly. We know from environmental psychology that certain geometries can lower stress or heighten focus. This method uses art to change the emotional temperature of the environment.
Okay, then there's narrative architecture.
Which is treating the client's movement through the building as a scripted story with chapters.
So the entrance is the introduction.
The transition to the meeting room is the rising action. The meeting itself is the climax. The exit is the resolution. It ensures emotional coherence, so there are no jarring breaks in the experience.
And then there is the personalization engine. This one really struck me because it addresses the fact that not all money conversations are the same.
Yes, think about the difference in mindset. If you are there for long-term wealth planning for your grandchildren, you want a calm, reflective, almost library-like environment.
Yeah.
But if you are there for a high-stakes corporate merger negotiation, you want clarity, sharpness, and high energy. The personalization engine adapts the physical environment to support those specific cognitive states.
The report also introduces a cultural monetization engine, which sounds a bit cold, honestly, monetizing culture.
It sounds cold, but it is just the business case. It is about converting these feelings of trust and calm into tangible financial value. If a client feels more secure because of the environment, they stay longer, they invest more. That is pure value capture.
And then there's the art center. But this isn't just a gallery in the lobby, right?
No, not a gallery. The report calls it the institutional nucleus. It is a production engine. It is the brain of the operation, where the symbolic identity of the bank is actively generated and maintained.
Moving on, we have the bridges system.
These are about connection. Bridges connect the different touch points seamlessly, so the physical space connects to the digital app, which connects to the client brochure.
It bridges the physical and digital worlds.
Exactly.
And the final system is the constellation engine.
Which ensures that all global offices map to the exact same identity.
So the London office feels spiritually connected to the Tokyo office.
Right. It creates a cohesive constellation of identity rather than just a bunch of scattered generic offices.
It is a completely comprehensive structural overhaul. But I want to make this really concrete for you listening. We have talked about the theory. What does this look like when I actually walk into a bank that has applied these EURAN systems? How does this translate to reality?
Well, let's look at emotional architecture applied to branches and headquarters. Imagine walking into a client floor. Instead of that sterile, intimidating silence of a marble mausoleum, the space is tuned.
Tuned how?
The lighting isn't harsh fluorescent, it is calibrated. The acoustics dampen the echo so you don't feel exposed. The visuals are specifically designed to lower your cortisol levels.
It changes the whole vibe from transactional to relational.
Right. And it builds symbolic identity, which leads directly to institutional trust.
Yeah.
When a space feels permanent, intentional, and authored, you inherently trust the people inside it more. It signals to your brain we are in control, and we have thought of absolutely everything.
The report uses the term experiential authorship here for investor confidence. I think that is a key takeaway.
It really is. It gives investors deep confidence. Because if the environment is sloppy generic or neglected, the client subconsciously wonders, is their risk management sloppy too? Is their due diligence generic?
Ouch. That is a powerful connection. Sloppy lobby, sloppy ledger.
It is exactly how the human brain works. We judge the book by the cover. Narrative architecture uses the building to tell you who the company is so they don't even have to explain it.
And cultural infrastructure then becomes a tool for competitive differentiation.
You stand out because you are the only firm that doesn't look like a generic corporate office park. And we mentioned the Arts Center as the institutional nucleus. That becomes the beating heart of this differentiation.
I want to touch on the bridges aspect again. The report mentions using bridges to connect finance to other worlds like aviation, real estate, and luxury. Why is that specific connection so important?
Think about the ultra-high net worth client. This person lives in a world of highly curated experiences. They fly private jets where the leather is stitched by hand. They stay in hotels where the staff anticipates their needs.
Right, their whole life is bespoke.
Exactly. So if their bank, which holds the wealth that makes that entire lifestyle possible, feels like a generic DMV office by comparison,
There is a massive jarring disconnect.
a fatal disconnect. The bridges system ensures that the financial experience matches the premium quality of the rest of their life. It signals very clearly we belong in your world.
And finally, the Constellation engine is used for multi-office coherence. So no matter where you travel, your bank feels like your bank.
Total global consistency.
Okay, I have to play the skeptic here for a moment. This all sounds beautiful. It sounds like a wonderful place to handle my money. But banks are heavily regulated fortresses. They have compliance officers breathing down their necks constantly.
Very true.
They have strict know your client and anti-money laundering laws. Can they actually do this? Or will the legal department just shut it down immediately?
That is exactly what the operational feasibility section addresses.
Mm-hmm.
The dossier is very clear that this isn't about breaking rules, it is about integrating into them.
So integration into compliance and regulatory frameworks.
Fully integrated. The report explicitly states this fits perfectly into KYC and AML frameworks. In fact, a calmer, more transparent environment can actually assist in compliance because clients are less defensive and more open.
What about compatibility with security and operational protocols? I assume we aren't replacing bulletproof glass with mood lighting?
No, definitely not. It is entirely compatible with safety protocols.
Yeah.
You don't sacrifice security for aesthetics. You integrate them seamlessly.
The report also mentions these systems being institution-friendly and having modular and reversible design.
This is huge for implementation. It is designed to fit into existing systems, not violently disrupt them. And it is reversible. It is flexible infrastructure. You can install these art systems and adjust them. It is not like pouring permanent concrete.
It also talks about integration with architectural and technical infrastructures.
Right. It works with the building's existing HVAC lighting and structural systems.
And scalability across branches and headquarters.
It works for a massive global headquarters in Frankfurt, but the exact same logic scales down perfectly to a small local branch. The principle of emotional coherence holds up at any size.
I also noticed it emphasizes being maintenance-friendly cultural infrastructure, so it doesn't require an army of artists to keep it running.
Exactly, it is durable.
But one thing that really surprised me was the mention of training and onboarding systems. Why does the staff need training on the interior design?
Because the staff needs to know how to use the building as a tool. They need to understand the emotional tools available to them. It is no good having a negotiation clarity mode in a meeting room if the wealth advisor doesn't know how to turn it on or why it matters. The staff has to be active participants in the culture, not just passive inhabitants of the space.
That makes a lot of sense. So it is operationally practical, it is compliant and secure. But now for the big question, the one every single banking executive listening is asking, the economic and strategic uplift. Exactly, does this actually make money or is this just a massive vanity expense?
The dossier is emphatic on this point. Culture produces measurable financial outcomes. It is not a sunk cost. It is an investment with a very clear financial logic.
Walk us through that logic. The first point is cultural identity as a trust engine.
Trust is literally the currency of finance. If clients trust you more deeply because of your cultural identity, they allocate more capital to you. That is direct, measurable revenue.
And symbolic clarity as a competitive advantage.
If 3 banks are pitching a client and 2 of them look confused and generic, and one looks authored and confident, the confident one wins the business every time.
Then there is experiential authorship as client acquisition, particularly for those ultra-high net worth individuals we talked about.
This acts as a magnet. Wealthy clients are actively looking for an institution that understands them culturally, not just financially. They want a permanent home for their wealth.
Now, this next one, narrative coherence as risk reduction, really surprised me. How on earth does spatial design actually reduce financial risk?
It goes back to human psychology. Narrative coherence lowers the perception of risk. If the story of the institution makes sense visually and spatially, the investment inherently feels safer to the client.
Because chaos breeds fear.
Exactly, and coherence breeds calm. When clients are calm, they make much better long-term decisions, and they panic far less during sudden market downturns.
That is a fascinating insight. Calm clients don't pull their money out during a dip.
Right. And institutional differentiation then leads to strong market positioning. You own a unique space in the market.
Which creates long-term symbolic value.
Value that easily outlasts quarterly earnings reports. It is about building a legacy brand that can weather severe market storms because the foundational culture is rock solid.
So what does this all mean for the future of the industry? The report finishes with a closing logic, a strategic invitation. It boldly states that finance is entering a completely new era.
We are seeing a fundamental shift in the industry's DNA.
The first major shift it lists is that identity replaces branding.
It is no longer about a slick logo or a catchy marketing slogan. It is about who you actually are, structurally and culturally.
And trust replaces marketing.
You can't just run television ads telling people you are trustworthy anymore. Consumers are way too smart for that. You have to build an environment that physically and emotionally creates trust organically.
And finally, symbolic presence replaces visual design.
It is not about looking pretty or trendy. It is about meaning something profound. It is about the physical infrastructure itself communicating the deep values of the institution.
The dossier warns that institutions that act now will be the ones to define the next chapter. It is basically a race to see who can stop being a machine and start being a culture.
It is entirely about leadership. The financial institutions that understand this shift, that realize they are cultural actors and not just transactional counting houses, will absolutely dominate the next century.
And the ones that stay beige?
They'll just fade into the background and become obsolete utilities.
You know, before we sign off, it makes me think about something not explicitly in the report, but totally related. What if the next major financial collapse isn't caused by a bad algorithm or a hidden derivatives market? What if it's caused by a cultural failure? What if the sterile, unfeeling spaces we build literally dictate the ethical boundaries of the people working inside them?
That is a chilling thought. If the space feels like a machine, people act like machines.
Something for all of you to think about the next time you walk into a branch. This deep dive has completely changed how I view financial spaces. I will definitely be looking at the lighting, the flow, the art, and asking, is this a machine or is this a story?
And that is the exact question the authors want the industry to confront.
They certainly do.